Welcome. Welcome, Oli. Welcome, Boris, to the Audacious Conversations. Definitely a first for me to have two guests at the same time. So it is exciting. And we were talking very briefly. For me, I'm in the third year. This is a real fun project of redefining Audacity under those three pillars of courage, care, and nonconformity, which I'm so excited to explore with you any of those today. But why don't we start with introducing yourselves, maybe with something audacious? Oli?
Sure. Thank you, Alina. So, I moved to Kenya 14 years ago with a rucksack to come and be a volunteer here. And now, after 14 years, I'm actually relocating my entire life to Mexico in order to promote Safarini, because we get so much interest. So many of our clients are from the States that we've made the decision that one of us should be over that side of the world to try and really promote the business. So I'm very willing to just up sticks and go and start somewhere new.
Wow, Mexico. We can talk about that, but I mean, I'd love to hear about what you are currently, I suppose, doing in Kenya. And Boris, what about you? Why are you there, staying behind?
Yeah, just staying behind. Yeah, I came here a little over 10 years ago, and I had worked in Asia, Latin America, and the US for a long time, and came to work in Kenya for a job in the tech sector. That was kind of a second career for me. So I've been working in international development and national security, mostly with the US government and NGOs, and came here for the Silicon Savannah to work in the tech space. And so for the past 10 years, my kind of second career has been as a business executive in Africa, building and growing startups to profitability and leading cross-cultural teams. And Oli has had quite a similar background in the renewable energy space here for his 15 years since being a volunteer. So we both have this background as business executives. And we wanted to build a business together that kind of leveraged that experience and competency with what we really, really love to do together. And was kind of the basis of our friendship, was going on adventures, particularly in northern Kenya. So I think perhaps the most audacious thing about us collectively now is that we've created this business, Safarini Leadership, which takes global executives to that remote area of the northern Kenyan frontier. And we spend a week walking alongside camels with a group of indigenous tribal elders. And together we co-facilitate a completely unique leadership development program with the people who take those journeys with us. And Safarini means on a journey in Swahili. And we think leadership is a journey, and that's what we're trying to do.
Oh, I love it. I didn't know that, actually, on a journey with Safarini. So, and I love that because your partnership and a little bit about it. I also have my own retreats in Transylvania, and I have a partnership with my business partner Tatiana. We do similar things and different. So that's common, and that's very audacious. So I'm very excited. As I think I mentioned to you, one of my life-changing experiences was sort of almost 3 years ago in Ghana, and I did a similar experience to what you are doing. Was 8 days there with a company called Elevate. So I'm really curious why, maybe the why, and as we were talking, why are you doing what you're doing and what's happening? What's the transformation happening in your experiences? Boris?
Yeah, sure. The why is complicated because I think in the spirit of Audacity, what we do is operationally complex, much like your retreats in Transylvania. I think, doing things different is hard. It's hard to get people bought in, and it's hard to deliver. But I think the reason we went for this kind of non-conformist approach is that from what we see, as you can tell, I'm from the US originally, Ollie's from the UK, and what we see, at least in our home cultures, or perhaps more broadly in the West, or the kind of modern business context or modern leadership context, is the conventional way isn't working. And I think we see that in a lot of the statistics about businesses or organizations where there's an engagement crisis. Burnout is sky high, employment engagement is low. I think Gallup reports that 3/4 of people in businesses are not meaningfully engaged, meaning not feeling involved, enthusiastic, or purposeful. And we've also been really inspired by the Global Human Flourishing study, which shows that the sort of youngest generation in the workplace, Gen Z, actually has the lowest levels of engagement. So it's getting worse. And I think we also see, whether it's in politics or business, we have a real problem with old people hanging on to power for reasons that would seem to be wrong to us, right? Whether it's wealth or status or power, but it's not leadership because of service. It's not retaining those singular positions of power because of a desire to serve, and that's backwards. And this, conforming to that approach has not worked. And so we want to see radical change in leadership. And so we want to do something radically different. And when we have spent time with the indigenous communities of northern Kenya, like the Samburu, who we work with, we see a radically different approach. And what we see is a flourishing community that is born of leadership rooted in service and connection and community, and not rooted in status, wealth, or power. And we don't we don't propose that business leaders come here and adopt a fully kind of tribal mechanism of leadership in their businesses, but we think there's an opportunity to kind of, by learning about someone else's culture that's radically different, a radically different approach to leadership, you ultimately learn a lot about yourself, and it forces us to be self-aware. And through that self-awareness, we can kind of become much more understanding of the cultural programming maybe that's running in the background, why we show up and lead in particular ways. And hopefully it forces people to rethink and challenge their assumptions and be able to lead more flourishing teams driven by purpose, teams connected to a really clear set of values. That's what we see in these indigenous communities. And that's what we hope business leaders or organizational leaders will take away from an experience with us and bring back to try things really, really differently, and to try and lead for different reasons, and to try and build flourishing teams and cultures that kind of reverse these troubling trends that we are seeing in the workplace.
I love that. And you're right. Actually, it's the whole non-conforming I love, because that's part of, one of the 3 pillars of Audacity. And it's not easy to, to go that radically different, as you said, with the elders and all of that wisdom, the ancient wisdom, as we're talking about, and the modern leadership, and how do you apply some of those wisdom moments to what's happening today. And I'm fascinated. I'm curious. I know how difficult it is to actually bring people to these experiences, and how transformative it is once they've had the experience. I think I don't know anybody in my experience that they've been on some of this. And you were talking about Mexico, Oli, which is interesting, because I also went to Mexico with one of my spiritual teachers 4 years ago now, end of the year, and that was truly exceptional. So I know, and I also know how difficult it is to get people to join, because of how radically different it is. So I'm curious, and that question goes to you, Oli, as to what do they come away with? Once they've been on this, what's the biggest learning that they're taking away to their own environments?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very individual thing. Different people have that kind of special aha moment at different times, right? It could be in a conversation with one of our Samburu elders who work as the cultural facilitators. It could be just having a moment of reflection, watching a mother elephant with her baby calf. But what people come away with varies from person to person, and how it kind of sinks in also varies. But I think just to repeat, there's something incredible about just being so completely out of your comfort zone that it really forces you to reckon with some of your long-standing beliefs. So if I can give you an example, Boris and I have always historically believed in meritocracy very strongly, and the Samburu are actually, the way they live their lives is completely the antithesis of a meritocracy. Everybody, regardless of their capability, their raw talent, gets the same investment in them, the same leadership development, because they are all collectively going to inherit the responsibility of the well-being of the tribe. And what we're seeing now in the West, in a very hyper individualized or individualistic society, the dark side of meritocracy, which is that if you are responsible for your own successes in life, that means you also have to take full responsibility for what you feel are your own failures in life. And I think that, what we've learned along the way is that's a contributing factor to the fact to why so many men in the West are depressed and feeling quite lost in life. So, that's just one example of a belief that I've always had, a perspective I've always had that's really been kind of turned on its head in recent years through the interactions and the conversations that we've had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can absolutely, fully agree that everybody will have their aha moments at different points and there's so many moments, and it's fascinating to hear there's the antithesis, as you said, the meritocracy of what the tribe will say, but there's always the paradox of it and what comes of it. And I know, we haven't got that much time, but I'd love to hear a little bit about, maybe what happens, what happens in that week, very briefly. Boris, maybe?
Sure. Well, we're able to tailor the experience to the needs of the group and who we're working with. So we're increasingly looking to work with organizations or groups of people, professional organizations, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of room to modify the experience. But the core experience that we do most often, or have done most often, is a 10-day experience in Kenya. So 10 days in country. We meet everyone here in the capital city of Nairobi. We meet with a famous anthropologist of the northern tribes who gives a kind of high-level academic explanation of the world that people are about to enter into, which is really helpful to just kind of ground them. We then drive about, sort of a quarter of the way up in terms of total mileage to where we're going, to an area called Nanyuki, and we spend a day kind of on a traditional safari. We take people out in Land Cruisers and we see some beautiful endangered wildlife. And at that point, we meet 3 Samburu elders from our team, Stephen, Veronica, and Dagama. And we undertake an exercise called Journey Lines. These are things that people prepare in advance, but they visualize the journey of leadership that they themselves have taken, and what are the underlying influences that have led them to, demonstrate or adhere to certain values in their leadership. And our Samburu colleagues do the same thing. So it's a really powerful, deep icebreaker where people are quite vulnerable and get quite deep into their personal and professional lives, which, we believe strongly are pretty overlapping these days. So we really get to know one another. And then the next day we get into a little bush plane and we fly to the far north of Kenya, where you can access by plane or by camel. And we touch down on a little dirt strip and we meet a team of camels and a team of Samburu warriors. And we begin a 6 to 7 day walk. And again, it can vary based on weather, based on animals. If there's a herd of elephants in the way, we might spend the morning watching the elephants and walk in the afternoon. But typically we wake up with the sun, we have a biscuit and a cup of coffee, and we start walking as the sun rises. We facilitate a lot of walk and talks. So if there were things that came up in the prior day, Oli and I will kind of give prompts to people to explore, but a lot of it is unstructured on the walk. And we're a big believer in walking as a really powerful mechanism to facilitate deep, focused conversations, the likes of which we don't usually have time for in our day-to-day. And then at midday, we set camp, we have lunch. And in the afternoon, Oli and I have developed a leadership development program with a team of psychologists, neuroscientists, and coaches. And we kind of roll that out in the afternoon. So we'll have a leadership circle. We've designed some games, some interactive activities where we invite the Samburu warriors from our crew to join us. We get to know each other a little bit. But there's kind of 1 to 2 hours of kind of structured, work that we do together in a group in the afternoon. And then there's time for reflection. So everyone gets a journal beaded by Samburu women. We give a lot of space for reflection on things you talked about on the walk or things that came up in the leadership circles or the activities. And then we gather for dinner, and then there's always a campfire. And the campfire is a time for storytelling. So the Samburu are an oral tradition, and values and purpose and approaches to leadership are not communicated by books or lectures, but by stories. And so we encourage a lot of storytelling as a really powerful way to learn and to kind of integrate some of the things that we've talked about. So that's kind of the schedule for 6 days. We finish at a luxury lodge. We have warm showers and robes and, hair dryers and nice things. And then everyone either goes onwards to other travel experiences, which we help them with, or they go home. But that's not the end of it. We've been really inspired by Joe Pine and the transformation economy, and believing that true transformation only happens if there's an integration phase, a third phase. So there's pre-work, there's the experience itself, and then there's that third integration phase. And what that looks like is virtual coaching. So Oli and I join with the group, and we have several weeks of online group coaching to explore application. So this is a great adventure and it will be a great story. We want it to be much more than that. So how is what you learned or took away or were challenged on while you were in Kenya, how is that coming up in your leadership, in your life, in your workplace, in your community? And it's particularly powerful for people who are struggling with that to hear others and what they're doing differently and what is resonating with them and showing up. And that really ensures that things are, like say, integrated for the long term. So yeah, it's ultimately a multi-month experience, but the core is that 10 days in Kenya and the 6 to 7 days in the bush, walking with camels, warriors, and elders of the Samburu tribe.
I love it. Yeah, when you just said, you can have somewhere to have a shower, because I can imagine those sort of 6 days, as you said, in the middle of nowhere with the elephants. But yeah, it sounds wonderful. And it's very similar, the walk and talk, it's always incredibly powerful. And then the reflections, and then, the structure, and then the stories around the fire and the integration. I mean, and that's 100%, it's similar to what we also do. The model, it's radically different, and it's also probably fairly ancient in the way that it always works. But I'm also curious, Oli, I mean, and I know you came on to the Audacious Conversation, but what, can you think of any audacious moments in some of those experiences that are unexpected or otherwise?
I think what surprises me, what continues to surprise me, is just how, even though it's a leadership development experience, we have people that really reassess their entire approach to life. I mean, that sounds a little bit kind of grandiose. And, when Boris and I started the business, we were very hesitant to use words like transformational. It's a big word, right, to use, especially when you're just, and just maybe as a little bit of a detour, we liked Safarini because we've said Safarini means on a journey in Swahili. We're all on a journey. Boris and I are on a journey. And really, Safarini started very much kind of as an experiment. We built these relationships in a very sort of organic way by going up to the north of Kenya and fostering relationships with warriors and elders from some of the nomadic tribes there. And over time, sort of were fascinated by their different ideas, their values, and how their values are foundational to their approach to leadership, and sort of started to ask ourselves, well, is there value in bringing people here and exposing them to this? And of course, the answer is that we've learned since then is yes, absolutely. But I'm always continuing to be surprised at how the extent of that impact. And so really it's in recent months that we've sort of leaned into some of that more bold language about transformational, the impact being truly transformational. I'll give you an example. One person that we had has went home, immediately sold property, and just kind of like actually leaned into helping us establish the foundation. So we have the Safarini Foundation, which is our sister non-profit organization, and that's really for our clients who want to give back to the community, who are really touched by the people that they meet, to donate money and support the projects that we assist up in that part of the world. And I think that just speaks to just how much people are impacted by what we do with them.
I love that. And it's true. I think once you've had people going through, then you also have the language. And I remember we were also very hesitant, what does transformation mean, or transformative? Most people, and then it's so overused that it just loses its value. And yet, you know, when you experience it, and because we've done it's in April or May, this 23rd to 26th, and we also have them in November, so they're fixed dates, but it's the 6th time, it's our 6th year, and we have 15 people every year, so we had a lot of people coming through this. So we have a lot of stories, to your point, Boris. We have a lot of stories to tell, and that's you know, that's my experience of that's how you enroll people, because they hear stories and they hear stories of transformation. You know, even if we just, you know, that word is grandiose, to your point, Oli. But it's interesting what you said about the foundation, the Safarini Foundation, because the model, I think I mentioned, I went to Ghana 3 years ago in 2023 with a company which is called Elevate, dear friend of mine, Genevieve, and that's their model. Their model is actually to really empower the local communities, and it is a sort of quasi charitable, but not. So when I invest in my self-development to come on your retreat, or to go on to sort of the, in her experience, it's or case was the Elevate, is I also not only self-fund my development, and I also fund someone else's. For her, she has like eight projects around the globe. One is in Ghana, I think there's one in Kenya, one in Colombia, and 8 extraordinary people, extraordinary stories that you do as you come as a participant. And I think that's that's a big why. You know, why we're all doing what we're doing is also to have a sort of sustainability to this leadership model, you know, giving back. So yeah, I love it. Do you have, I mean, again, because as you are developing the model and refining it in many ways, but is there an ideal audience? Is it, you know, have you noticed yet that there is, or not really? And I suppose any of you who feel called to answer that, is there anyone in particular that's attracted to? Maybe Boris? Oh, Oli?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, and Oli can agree or disagree with what I say, maybe. But I think, like, no, there isn't a sort of perfect person for this, because, as we said earlier, it's just an incredible experience that almost anyone can take something powerful away from. Because we're talking about matters of leadership and growth and development, you know, having people who are sort of in that, like, at least maybe in their mid-30s or 40 plus is helpful. They're like a little bit later on in life. I'd say probably our average age is around 50. We've had people in their 60s. We've had people who are 40 or low 40s. I'm not sure we've had too many younger than that, but it allows for, I think, having different generations is powerful. I mean, a big thing we talk about is leading across multiple generations, and the Samburu tribe is a gerontocracy in anthropological language, which is that it's not based on titles, but it's based on the generation that you are in. And so everyone kind of has a different purpose, a different role, depending on the generation, and leadership is passed down in a very kind of organized way. So bringing people of different generations, whether it's, you know, millennials or boomers or Gen X, is a really powerful experience. So we look for people in that kind of broad age range who are in a leadership position or just fancy themselves as leaders and want to take on leadership. It can be community leadership as much as organizational leadership. And we've seen that. We've seen people go back and have really powerful impacts on their communities. And I think especially people who are just committed to trying to do things differently and constant self-improvement and looking for a new way of driving that, and are maybe bored with the old, you know, conference room, you know, kind of classic leadership development or management development experience. You know, they want to get somewhere different, whether it's Transylvania or whether it's Samburu. They want to do something different, invest in themselves, and are open to increasing their self-awareness and challenging their assumptions. If anyone who has that mindset is in that broader age range and fancies 6 days of walking, can definitely join us and can take something away from it.
Amazing. Oli?
Yeah, I was just going to add that there's a difference between sort of being a leader doesn't need to be just reserved for people who have the title of leader, right? And that's quite on point for us, because in the Samburu tribe, for example, there are no titles. There's no sort of recognized individual who's at the top of the pile, and that, you know, leadership is their responsibility. And so, you know, we've had people who have come who are very senior in what they do, but maybe they're still an individual contributor, or maybe they have no plans to be managing a team. But by their experience, there is a huge opportunity for them to show leadership and to provide young people with leadership. And so I think that it's it's not reserved or exclusive for people who are designated as, you know, with a C-suite title, for example. I think anybody who wants to be a leader, like Boris says, in their community, in their family, can benefit a huge amount from what we do.
I love that. And I'm sure that's the case, actually. I mean, you know, again, our retreat is called Audacious Leaders Retreats, and it's about self-leadership. That's what we teach first and foremost. Right. You know, if you lead yourself, you can't actually lead others. That's the other thing. You can't lead others until you lead yourself. So you have to do that work first. And then you're ready with that, then you can lead others, and then you can lead change too. So, and I love that it's, as you said, Boris, it's sort of multi-generational, although, you know, 30s, because there is some experience already into 60s, and because there is a lot of learning from each other, and it's similar. You know, our retreats tend to be, you know, or not exclusively, we've now ventured it, but it used to be, you know, mainly women when we started. It's because it's 2 women, so I think it's more of a natural transition. I suspect for you, again, it's mixed. But what's exciting you, I suppose, this year? You know, what's an exciting project that's coming up? Audacious, maybe.
Well, it's interesting that you mention that your clientele is mostly women. I think that's intentional for you. When we started this, we had no real expectations or goals in terms of what the mix of people would look like. Let's see who's interested, and, you know, and come who may. But we've actually found the same. 75% of our clientele over the past 2 years has been women. And I think for various reasons, as we come to like work with psychologists and kind of understand maybe some sort of generalizable differences across genders, like we understand that a little more. A lot of what we talk about is connection and resilience through community and connection, and building collective, sustainable resilience by, you know, driving a culture of connection and support. And the Samburu are, you know, as someone said too recently, they're badasses, if you want to look at it that way. The warrior culture. But the real thing that makes them strong is that everything is shared. No one walks alone. No one does anything alone. Man, woman, boy, girl. Culturally, you're mandated to always go together and to support one another. And really what we see is that is what makes them so strong. And it stands in contrast to the kind of Lone Ranger, heavy weighs the crown, if you fall down, pick yourself back up again kind of mentality that we grew up with, Oli and I did. And I think that kind of messaging is particularly strong for men, right? Like the Lone Ranger is kind of like the classic, the sort of ideal model of masculinity, maybe going off and being full of grit and strength. And I think we see so many men struggling in society and having such this loneliness crisis that men are suffering. You know, surely those things are related. And so what we're really excited about is we're doing our first ever men's trip. The second year, we're bringing a group of men to come and go on this great adventure alongside these warriors, but to have open discussions about, you know, what is a model of masculinity that we can all kind of get behind. And Oli and I believe that the model of masculinity that the Samburu demonstrate and practice, and that's kind of culturally embedded in them from when men are boys, is something that we could learn a lot from in the West, regardless of how tough or gritty we think we are, regardless of our titles. This is an opportunity to put those things aside, move past titles, move past careers, and think about in the next phase of life, what's a form of masculinity that we want to model in that next stage of the journey. And we're doing a few online discussions like this to kind of build some interest. And it's really interesting to hear what people have to say and what men are struggling with, and we're excited about that men's journey for sure.
Well, I'm excited for you, because actually one of the things I know we at time, but what we didn't talk about is the third pillar of care. And so when you said sharing, for me, you know, I immediately got very excited, because sharing is caring. and caring is sharing, and that's definitely for that sort of masculine energy. That's not easy, you know, and men never ask. That's an overstep to ask for help, which is part of the loneliness. I'm very excited for you. So you said end of the year. Well, then to be watched. And Oli in Mexico, I suspect will be a lot of them in Kenya, but who knows, maybe Mexico too, if you guys are expanding. So yeah, I mean, how would people find you? And I know it's sort of a little over, but if they wanted to come on your wonderful experiences, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's many ways. Our principal platform that we post a lot on is our LinkedIn page. Everything, because of our unusual name, everything is just Safarini Leadership. So Safarini, spelled phonetically, Safirini. And you'll see that on LinkedIn, on Instagram, SafariniLeadership.com. What else am I missing, Boris?
Those are the main ones. Yeah, SafariniLeadership.com, Safarini Leadership on Instagram, and Safarini Leadership on LinkedIn. The social media platforms give you a real sense of the spectacularly beautiful environment that we're in. It's truly remote, truly one of the most beautiful places in the world. Beautiful people, beautiful landscapes. And then on LinkedIn, we share a little bit more kind of the sort of pedagogy or the philosophies that we follow and some of the research that's inspiring what we're doing. So I think both of those are helpful. And then the website, SafariniLeadership.com, gives you a good kind of summary of what we do. And info@SafariniLeadership.com is an email that both Oli and I will get. And we are always really happy to have a non-committal informational conversation with anyone who, thinks this is interesting. Happy to do this with them in private and see if it is going to be something that they could benefit from.
Great. Fabulous. Well, for anybody who's been joining us today, or if they listen to this later, for sure, that's all great. And just to finish off, this conversation will also be uploaded by us on YouTube, probably in a few weeks' time. So again, we'll be able to find it there, and we will also share. So Adapter and me under it's Audacious Alina. Actually, that's the YouTube channel that has all of these Audacious Conversations. So we will share that with the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, absolutely all the very best, Oli, with your relocation to Mexico. Exciting. And with your audacious projects. Really can't wait to hear more about them, hopefully, before the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alina.
Soon. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.